Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Pasek at the Wellness Connection. I'm here today to talk about a story, and it's a really common story that we hear. It might sound familiar to you, it might not. Some pieces of the story might sound familiar to you. There's always a little bit of variation here, but it is incredibly common. And if you have been struggling with mysterious health symptoms, really not getting the answers that you think you need, and feeling like there's been pieces of your puzzle missing, this might be a story that is relevant for you to hear. So I'd like to tell the story of a person, a hypothetical person, but it may sound very familiar. There might be aspects, again, that are not quite the same, but the big picture might ring true with you. So this person is often a woman most of the time. It does happen to men, but a lot of these details are not really relevant there. You'll see why in a moment. Often, this person will feel great. You may feel really great as a kid and not really have any significant health challenges until you reach puberty. And that is a trying time for anybody, but it might be particularly rough for you. It might not be. It might not be. But maybe when you hit puberty, you start experiencing some depression or some anxiety without any real reason that you could point to. And you may talk to somebody about that, or you may end up on medication, some antidepressants or anxiety medication. That's something that you could experience. You may start to feel more fatigued than you would expect to be, tired when maybe you shouldn't be, even if you're getting good sleep. There may be some symptoms of PMS, or even in really severe cases, what's called PMDD, where it's just really, really uncomfortable, really painful around the time of your cycle, sometimes extending, for several weeks throughout the month. There may also be some difficulty with weight loss. And that could be something that just doesn't quite add up. You might be active, might be eating right, but just not necessarily seeing the outcome in your body, in your health, in your weight that you would expect from what you're putting in. And if you fast forward a few years, when you're ready to start a family, if you decide to do that, there may be no problem. There may not be any challenges getting pregnant, no fertility struggles. And typically, most of these people that tell this story usually feel pretty good when they're pregnant. There's of course exceptions, there may be some nausea, some upset. But in general, some of that fatigue, some of that, maybe some mood fluctuations that were there, if they were there before, they may kind of level out. And pregnancy to people with this story generally feels pretty good. Generally feels pretty good. There are other people, however, who have with the same story, who have a really significant fertility challenges, and it runs the gamut. Sometimes it's just a while of trying to conceive, up to 6 months or 12 months or even longer. That can happen. Oftentimes, this type of person will need to see a specialist, right? A fertility specialist, or even several. They may have to do some Clomid treatments or something like that. May need to be on some hormones like progesterone or other things like that. Maybe even needing to try IUI or IVF, different types of treatments, sometimes with varying levels of success. Unfortunately, we often hear that there's a miscarriage in this person's story, sometimes several miscarriages, and it can be pretty devastating. Either way, once that first baby arrives, if there is success for the person who's been struggling, or for the person who didn't have any challenges, oftentimes after that baby gets here, postpartum, there might be a mild dip. There might be a bit of sometimes a crash, but sometimes just kind of a return to some fatigue that doesn't necessarily add up. Certainly some mood changes, and depression is the most common way that shows up, postpartum depression. It's usually fairly mild, but it can be pretty severe after this first child. Certainly see some weight gain that is similar to that early phase in life. It just doesn't quite add up. Of course, it's going to be a challenge after a baby arrives, but it doesn't seem to be the same, doesn't seem to be maybe as easy as other people. We may see some brain symptoms, maybe brain fog, or just things aren't quite firing as quickly as you would expect. Often we'll see some gut symptoms show up, maybe some IBS, maybe some constipation, maybe just some bloating, not feeling quite right in the gut. All fairly mild and may just be something that you attribute to being a new parent, especially early on. A lot of times when the decision to make the family larger, grow the family, let's have another kid, when that comes along for that first person, we often see pretty easy conception again. And a lot of times you'll feel better than you had postpartum. When you're pregnant, things just seem like kind of level out, almost like a fog is lifted, and you feel almost back to an old version of yourself, right? But a lot of times there may be some additional challenges with fertility here as well. Similar story to what we talked about initially. The most common thing that we hear in this story is, boy, after that second baby got here, things just weren't the same in a whole slew of areas. That is such a common story. Just felt crippling fatigue that didn't add up at all. That never really got better, depending on how long after this happens that we're talking to this person. Boy, it could be months, it could be years, it could be decades. And sometimes that just feeling of like, I just haven't really been the same since after that child arrived is a very common thing to hear. Postpartum depression can be devastating here. And it is one of the most important clues when we hear this story. Boy, it was just debilitating postpartum depression after my second kid. I went on antidepressants, not antibiotics, antidepressants right away. I've been on those ever since. And it helped, but I still didn't maybe quite feel the same. If I stop taking them, I really crash. I really can't handle doing that. That's a very common thing to hear. Would you get any testing at this point? A lot of times people will tell me, yeah, I talked to my doctor about it. They said, oh, it's probably depression. It's probably just being, a new mom. Are we going to do any testing? Probably not. A lot of times we end up just going on some type of antidepressant or something like that, or just having to deal with it and learn to adjust to the new normal. The really common theme here moving forward is fluctuations, and almost like you're on a roller coaster, a very unpredictable roller coaster with all of these symptoms. It's just, you might be cruising along feeling great for a bit, and then boy, you feel on top of the world, and then you just crash. And there is no rhyme or reason to these fluctuations. Those fluctuations can be in mood, you might be anxious, you might be depressed. It might just swing back and forth with not really any predictability. Maybe even volatile or angry, just rational anger that doesn't make sense. Feeling like you have a hair trigger. Energy certainly would follow that roller coaster pattern. Boy, I feel great sometimes, and then other times I just can't even get out of bed. It just doesn't make sense. Even if you're getting plenty of sleep, but certainly if you're not, right? Especially with now 2 kids. Brain function is a very common thing to see not working properly here at this point. It's almost like there's just a fog or a veil over everything. Just things aren't sharp. Can't remember people's names. Can't do calculations in your head. Can't remember numbers. Well, no one knows a phone number anymore, right? Used to be able to say that. Maybe just feeling sluggish, like you're just not quite as quick as you think you should be, or certainly as you used to be. Again, if you express these concerns to your doctor, a lot of times they'll say, let's increase the dose of your antidepressant. Let's try other antidepressants. Let's do a different medication. Let's just add more medication on top of this. If you're lucky, maybe some blood testing, which most of the time They'll just tell you, well, they just told me it was normal. They just said everything was normal. Maybe you get the thyroid tested. Maybe your doctor is savvy in looking at this, and they'll often tell you, well, the thyroid testing looks normal. Or maybe it might be just right on the edge, just borderline low thyroid, borderline sluggish, right? Sometimes we even see the opposite. It looks like you look at the range and you say, this almost looks like hyperthyroid, like overactive thyroid. What's going on there? Or borderline overactive. All the while, you're trying to put pieces together here and it just doesn't add up. And one of the biggest things that really tends to raise concern to start asking other people for help is weight loss that does not compute. Weight loss that doesn't compute, or weight gain that doesn't compute, right? You can do all the right stuff. You can be eating perfectly, not eating junk, watching your macronutrient ratios, certainly maybe watching your calories, being on a paleo diet or a keto diet, and it just doesn't add up. You could be exercising with the best of them, doing everything that should result in weight loss that does not compute. It's like you're trying to do 1 + 2 = 3. 3 doesn't come out the other end. That equation just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. And you drive yourself crazy trying to figure that out. Sometimes we meet this person pretty quickly. Other times it is decades later. And all of this stuff just keeps getting worse and worse, or it just keeps fluctuating to the point of feeling crazy. And you see doctor after doctor, or maybe specialist after specialist, and not necessarily getting any real answers and certainly no solutions for what to do here. All the while, there could be other symptoms that are coming and going here. You might be experiencing IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, maybe significant constipation or diarrhea or alternating back and forth. Certainly, aches and pains are a very common thing, almost to the feeling of arthritis or fibromyalgia, like I just hurt, I just sore all the time, or it's very unpredictable. I didn't do anything. I was just achy and sore and so tired I couldn't get out of bed, for a few days, or this day and then I felt fine, and it just doesn't add up. It doesn't compute. Maybe a loss of your temperature regulation. You feel hot or cold when it doesn't make sense, or you might tend toward one or the other or fluctuate back and forth. Maybe low libido, maybe other hormonal symptoms like headaches and cramping and mood swings. Maybe heart palpitations, where you feel like your heart is racing for no reason all of a sudden, and it might just kind of come and go. It might stick around for a while and you feel real anxious, and then it might go away with no rhyme or reason. These are the things that we hear in our office every single day. Every single day. This is a very, very common story. It may be your story, it may be somebody you know. If this is how you have experienced your life, there's a very good chance that your thyroid is involved here. Not necessarily your thyroid as the main problem. Your thyroid lives right here in your neck, but your thyroid is very often the victim of autoimmune attack. And autoimmunity is when your immune system, which is really our defender, our immune system is supposed to attack and destroy invaders like bacteria or viruses, infections in our body. Our immune system is supposed to attack those and kill them and destroy them, and then move on, go back to detecting and protecting us. When your immune system gets confused and it turns on your own body and starts attacking it and destroying our own body parts, like your thyroid, that's called autoimmunity. The name of thyroid autoimmunity is Hashimoto's, and Hashimoto's is epidemic. It is the most common cause of a low functioning thyroid. A lot of people have a low functioning thyroid. So if this sounds familiar to you in part or in whole, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you out with this. I hope you found this informative. If you have any questions, any comments on this, or any other topics you'd like us to discuss, please leave a link in the comment. It was very good to see everybody today.